Nintendo has been issued a challenge, but not like in a fun Mario Party type way, but more in an unfun legal way. It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the gaming news. News that can be viewed online on several devices, unless you happen to have a Switch 2 that's banned from online services. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Nintendo starting to ban Switch 2 consoles from online services for using MIG cards to load potentially pirated games on the Switch 2. Well, the Brazilian government has decided to challenge them on it. So to backtrack a little bit, Nintendo did a recent update to their user agreement, basically saying that they can fully render the system unusable if their user agreement is violated. Obviously, they didn't do this with the MIG card situation, but instead they just removed online services from the consoles. Well, the Public Consumer Protection and Defense Program in Sao Paulo, Brazil, also known as Procon SP, has filed a request that Nintendo remove the clause from their user agreement and not enforce banning or bricking consoles. Their main argument is that removing the console's online ability removes key features from the system that users expect and have already paid for, especially if they purchase a Switch Online membership. They did say that Nintendo already has a legal team looking into the complaint and that they have 20 days to respond. Now, similar to Sony's lawsuit around digital games that we covered last week, even if Nintendo does change this policy, it'll probably only be in Brazil. But overall, I think the main issue with doing console bans is the risk of someone buying them secondhand and not knowing that it's banned from online services, which has already happened with the Switch 2. Now, I understand that Nintendo doesn't want to do an account level ban because someone can just make a new account, whereas if you have your console banned, it's a lot more work and money to replace the console. But you could always buy a cheaper Switch 1 if your Switch 2 does get banned. Well, cheaper for now. Aside from this whole legal challenge, Nintendo has announced a price change coming on August 1st for Canada. So Nintendo has decided to tease that a price change is coming for the Switch 1 console, games, subscriptions, and accessories in Canada. Now, you would think that it would be a price reduction considering that they just released a new system, but they mentioned that they're going to be adjusting the price based on market conditions, so it sounds like it's most likely going to be going up. The timing of this whole thing is just weird. Now, obviously, I'm not for price increases, but it would have at least made more sense to do it before the Switch 2 came out. And speaking of things that would have made more sense if they had happened a few years ago, did you know Anthem, the game, is still online and playable? So Anthem is currently online and playable, but it won't be for much longer because EA has announced that Anthem servers are going offline on January 12, 2026. They've stopped the purchase of in-game currency and said players who have already purchased currency can still use it until the game is fully shut down. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was confused about this news because I thought Anthem shut down a few years ago. And shout out to PC Gamer because they were one of the few articles that had an appropriate title. Every other article I looked at was like making it seem like, oh yeah, Anthem's been around the whole time. Like, no, I'm surprised that it was still around. But anyway, I knew they basically stopped development on it back in 2021, but I didn't realize it was still playable. Not that there's anything wrong with playing it if you like that game, I just legit thought that it was already shut down. EA did mention that there were no layoffs as a result of the game shutting down, but as several articles pointed out, BioWare, the game's developer, was already hit with layoffs in 2023 after the development for the game had already stopped. So yeah, it's good that no one else is losing their jobs, but it's probably because BioWare was already impacted by this years ago. But of course, we can't mention layoffs without talking about the massive layoffs at Microsoft. So I briefly touched on the rumor last week that Microsoft would be doing major layoffs that would also impact the Xbox division, and it looks like that's indeed what happened. So Microsoft as a whole cut 9,000 jobs, and the Xbox division has taken a major hit. It's not currently known how many out of the 9,000 were from the Xbox division, but a lot of Xbox studios have been affected. ZeniMax Online Studios, who develop Elder Scrolls Online, had a new MMO that they were working on that's been canceled. Rare was also hit with layoffs and had their upcoming game Everwild Cancelled. Turn 10 Studios, the developers of Forza Motorsport, is said to have lost around 50% of their staff. Call of Duty Studio Sledgehammer and Raven and support studio High Noon have also had cuts. Blizzard also faced cuts and is discontinuing support for their mobile game Warcraft Rumble, and Halo Studios had cuts as well. It's also rumored that a new game that John Romero was working on with his company Romero Games was also affected as his studio announced that their publisher canceled funding for their game as well as several other unannounced projects. It hadn't been announced that they were doing a game with Microsoft, but considering the timing of them losing their funding along with the Microsoft layoffs, it seems like that was probably the case. But one of the biggest announcements from the layoffs is that Microsoft has shut down the initiative the studio that they founded in 2019 to develop the new Perfect Dark game, and that game has been canceled as well. So it sounds like most of Xbox was affected in one way or another by these layoffs, and even studios that didn't directly work for Xbox may have been affected by this. Now, as far as the affected employees, Phil Spencer sent out an internal memo basically saying that they were doing these layoffs to continue their success in gaming and be more agile and effective. Which I never get when companies say they want to be more agile after doing layoffs. Like, what are you, a cheetah chasing down its prey? But anyway, they did mention in the memo that they're offering severance, benefits, and job placement for the affected employees. But yeah, I mentioned last week that I hoped the rumor wouldn't be true, but this has affected way more people than I initially expected. But with all the bad news getting out there about the layoffs, it somehow got even worse because one of the executive producers at Xbox Game Studios publishing division, Matt Turnbull, decided to post some helpful tips on LinkedIn for the people affected by the layoffs. So he posted on LinkedIn saying that people affected by the layoffs should use AI to, quote, help reduce the emotional and cognitive load that comes with job loss. Then he goes on to give example prompts that people can enter for things like career planning, and updating your resume, and networking and career outreach. So yeah, it's not the best time to be like, hey, I know you're getting fired by the company, but let AI make this easier for you. Also, the Video Games Chronicle article points out that Microsoft's heavy investment in AI most likely led to a lot of these layoffs. So yeah, it's just not the best time for any of that. But there is some good news for Xbox fans, courtesy of PlayStation, and that's what we're talking about today in our final story. So we talked a lot previously about Xbox exclusives coming to PlayStation, with Gears of War being the most recent announcement, but it's very rare that it would be the other way around. MLB The Show is one of the few games that is PlayStation published that's on Xbox, but that's because Xbox did the deal with MLB directly and not Sony. But now Sony is apparently voluntarily putting a game that they published on Xbox. So it was announced by Arrowhead, the game's developer, that Helldivers 2 is coming to Xbox on August 26th. It looks like Sony is still publishing the Xbox version of it too. So yeah, this is the first time that I can think of where they're voluntarily allowing one of their games to go to Xbox. Now, to clarify, Sony doesn't own Arrowhead, the studio that developed the game, but they do own the Helldivers IP and they published the game, so it's still most likely their decision to put this game on Xbox. This could have always been the strategy, as this was one of the few games that launched on PS5 and PC on the same day, and it ended up being a way bigger hit than they expected. So I feel like at this point, the game's been out for over a year, and it's been cross-platform since launch, so they probably figured they've gotten the most money out of the PS5 and PC people that they're going to get, so releasing it on Xbox may renew some interest in the game. Arrowhead did confirm that it would have crossplay with the other two versions of the game, so yeah, it's a little weird that Sony is doing this, but it is a multiplayer game without any kind of single player campaign, so I'm guessing that their strategy is just to get as many people playing it as possible. But let me know how you feel down in the comments about Sony releasing a game on the Xbox. Again, let me know down below, and if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification button thing wherever it is to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And I always do at least 2 things at the same time.